So tell us how the abstract expressionism came through it, and maybe touch upon your background in other forms of art for us.
Well, I was an art major, painting major, but also an art education major. And so abstract expression was the one genre I never got. So when I first started teaching just out of college, I was latching on to French Impressionists because Monet and Renoir and all these other artists really painted landscapes that I was really enamored of. But abstract expressionists, which meant non-objective. And non-objective means something you're not looking at a house or a horse or something that's obvious the subject, but these are non-subjects. And so the famous abstract expressionists would say their paintings end where your imagination begins. And so I took it on to learn about what I never understood. And then once I started understanding it, then I started teaching it, and people really took to it. So it's the most popular workshops that I teach around the country. And I'm just growing as when I learn something, I teach it. I don't covet information. I want to share information. And I've always been that way.
So how do you go about teaching people you talked about abstract expressionism, you not quite getting it. How do you teach people to get it?
How do you really open that up in people's mind when what they want to do is photograph a mountain range or an animal or something like that? I'm taking them polar opposite. I'm taking them into really junkyards and places that look really unsavory. And yet, when they come away with something extraordinarily beautiful, it's really highly rewarding. And I do it through very elaborate, well thought out lectures that I spend years assembling. So I don't take it lightly. And I show one shot, I'll show a series of shots of Jackson Pollock, which was this painter, if you're not aware, who threw paint on the floor. And it's beautiful, but it's completely abstract and complex. And then I show the side of a freight truck driving 65 miles an hour down a freeway, where I've taken a picture of the side of the truck and I call it a Jackson Pollock, and nobody even questions it because in fact it looks just like the previous artwork that I've shown them. And so that really starts to sink in that you can find art anywhere. You just have to have the imagination and the eye to see it. But it takes time, and it takes lectures, and it takes redundancy. And then suddenly it's like working on a muscle. It starts to relax, and they start to see art anywhere around them. And that really is the source of that quote.
Yeah, and isn't that beautiful when you start seeing art everywhere? That's really the source of such fulfillment and happiness that certainly I believe in life, right?
It's a great metaphor, finding beauty in decay, birth and renewal. These are themes, and that is a positive theme. And so I'm all about uplifting, educating, inspiring people. I've been that way through over 100 books and TV shows and things like that. I do shoot, degraded environments that have been destroyed by bad policies or, fish nets around the neck of a whale or things like that. But what I'm interested in is inspiring people and finding beauty. That keeps me going for 5 decades.
So why photography? How did that come about?
It came out of, it was purely accidental, actually. I was a painting major at the University of Washington, but I started getting into climbing. And I was always one of those kids that was rooting around in the neighborhood woods and hiking and getting into the mountains. I loved that. But when I was in my 20s and then at college, I became friends with other young climbers. And so I joined them and started taking an old camera along to document the climbs to show friends and family where I was going on weekends. And my allegiances shifted from painting to photography little bit by little bit. And by the time I graduated with 2 degrees 7 years later, I really was much more into photography than painting. Simply put, it was easier to create an original composition through the photographic medium than to conjure up a meaningful painting from a blank canvas. And so my temperament and the way I am suits photography far better than just sitting at an easel and painting. And I never look back at that. And yet I draw from what I learned from art school and apply it into my painting, into my photographs. And I remember instructors goading me on never to rest on my laurels or to keep working on previous successes, but to always try new things. And photographically, then I've expanded and I keep expanding. The work I'm doing today, people would never expect of me. I'm doing a book called Act of Faith that looks at world's big religions, but also voodoo, shamanism, things that people would never associate with Wolfe, the wildlife photographer. And yet another body of work was called The Human Canvas, where I painted over 100 individuals into really ornate backdrops that I had previously created. And that body of work really shook a lot of people up in a positive way, but they would never have expected that of me. So I love to surprise my audience. And just when somebody's pigeonholed me into one category, I try intentionally to show a different side. And that I really brought forward from what the instructors were really intending for me to do.